Thank you very much, everyone. I'd just like to say this is the meeting of the Board of Parks. If the clerk could call the roll, please.
Just a correction, it's a meeting of the Parks and Recreation Subcommittee.
What did I
Counselor.
say?
Board of Parks.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. All right, so it's the Parks and Recreation Subcommittee. Sorry, I see so many Board of Park people here. Roll call.
Council Mercia.
Here.
Council Gitchia.
Here.
Council Leahy. Two present.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming on this pre-blizzard conditions and the rain and everything. I really appreciate it. I just want to introduce everybody in the room. I know it'll take some time, but I think it's very important. We have members of the Board of Parks, and that's Kiki Rudy, and we have Mr. Conter right here, and we also have Shannon Cohen, our Parks Superintendent. We have Peter Fatacanti, Parks and Recreation, and so many titles, Lisa Golden from the Health Department. We have the Secretary of the Board of Parks, Haley Williams. We have our Chief Financial Officer, Connor Baldwin, and his assistant, Austin Ball. We have our City Auditor, Kelly Oakes. We have one of our members of the Parks and Recreation Subcommittee, that's Eric Gitchia. Our third member is away on vacation and not able to be here this evening. We have our first assistant city solicitor, and that is Corey Williams here. And I brought him forward for the simple reason that maybe we might need to draw up something, and I'm not an attorney, so it's nice to always have backup by your attorney. We have a member of the public here who's the president of the Tyler Park, and his name is Robert. One moment, Robert, I got it. Hunt. Okay, thank you so much. I did meet Robert the other day, so I know his situation and his concern, and I kind of wholeheartedly, I'm not trying to take sides, but I agree with what you're saying. And we have our city clerk, Michael Gary. So I just want to say that a motion came forward, and it was to discuss the handbook, look at the handbook that was before us, and it's the Board of Parks handbook. And then there were so many questions that it was referred to my subcommittee. So having said that, it's going to be informative, but I know that we have a handbook here. I'm not saying that I'm right, so maybe I'm not right, so you can just give your opinion. We have a handbook, and I looked at the handbook very thoroughly. I do agree with a lot of things that are in here, but I think that we should have a policy in place. That's why I have the city solicitor here. A policy, because there was discussion as to who is the person, or what body is it that arranges the fees, that takes the fees when someone wants to, rent a park, to have a birthday or a gender identity revelation, or and also if we have a birthday party, who collects the fees here, and who, well, everything is set here, and according to the finance as to how much does it cost to do this. And going over this, let's say it was $170 to use a field for a birthday party. It was $170 for one person, but it was like $75 for another. I don't understand why someone paid $170, but the fact is neither one of them paid, so it just made us kind of crazy, because if you wanted to take your child into Chuck E. Cheese and they had a certain fee that you had to pay, I'm certainly sure you're not going to have that party and walk out the door without paying. And I don't really feel that we should allow people to do these things unless they pay up front. I don't know. That's just me. I don't know who sets the policy or the rules, but actually, I don't think the handbook to me is a policy. It does show a lot of guidelines as to fees and charges and things like that, but it doesn't say who is responsible to make the decision. I believe Mass General Law might say that, because we did get Councilor Gitchia did show us Mass General Law saying that the Board of Parks is responsible for setting what the charge is to use the certain field or whatever. I understand that, but whose job is it to collect that money? Who, and can you collect it right away? There's no policy in place outlining these things. I think the Board of Parks does an outstanding job. I know that every time we have something referred that we have to make a decision about naming or whatever, it's not ultimately our position to make that final decision. The Board of Parks supersedes anything that the Parks Subcommittee does, and we realize that. So that should be a policy. I know that because I've been here long enough, but maybe not every city councilor knows that. So there should be a policy in place stating the Board of Parks is responsible to determine what the cost is to rent the fields or parks or whatever, but who's collecting the money? You know, I don't know that. I don't know who's collecting. Is it the treasurer? I don't know. There has to be a set standard for something, and I want my colleague on my left to weigh in on this. And I don't know if anybody agrees with me. I don't know if someone can answer these questions. I don't know. So let's just do it one at a time. So who wants to answer the question as to who is collecting the money? Because we're owed like $23,000, and so say it slow though, because I have to write this all down.
So the current system is set up so that the people pay directly on the website. And every month we get a turn-in from the bank that when they deposit money to the city, and we run a statement to rectify where those funds came from. But as far as chasing down outstanding fees, there's nobody who's been assigned that role. The Board of Parks Secretary was a stipend position up until about 7 or 8 years ago. And that stipend position used to report to the Board of Parks, to the Parks Commissioner, Tom Bellegarde. When his position left and he became the DPW Commissioner, he still worked with that person to oversee everything. And then through the years, he's been gone and other people have come in.
Peter, wait a minute. Let me just say one thing. I want to rent a field. Let's say I want to rent a field. I'm a coach and I want to rent a field. How do you get, let's start at the beginning. What do I do with payment? How do I pay this? Say this slower.
So once your permit is approved, if there is a fee attached to it, based on the City Council fee schedule, you would then receive an email that your permit's been approved, and then you can log into the account on your website and pay the fee.
Okay,
once you
stop there and pay the fee. Pay the fee, okay. So it goes to the bank? How?
So once you log into your account, you can pay the fee, and you can print your permit at that time. You can't print it until you pay the fee. Once you pay the...
You can't print the permit till you pay the fee?
Correct.
Okay.
And once you pay the fee, the bank, the website essentially has the money, and at the end of the month, they do a monthly turn-in to the city's bank, and that's when the money is turned over to the city.
So that's a good plan. I think that's a good plan. But now, let's say that the check bounces, they don't get a permit anyway if they don't follow this procedure.
Correct. If there's a
So
fee
then
attached.
how does someone owe $23,000 or how does someone owe a lot of money then?
The way it would happen is if there is nobody working the site where they are having an event, or if the person working at this event doesn't ask for a permit and prove that there is a permit on
So
hand.
you're saying someone is a coach and they have the audacity to use the field without even getting a permit? Is that happening? Wow. I'm shocked. So what's done in that case? What if they keep doing that? You can't just someone said to me, I want to have something at the South Common, and we're going to have a bunch of people. It's about domestic violence and whatever and all this and that. What are you going to do? I said, go down to the Board of Parks, and that's what I did. they went to, well, actually, they couldn't go the night of the meeting, so I went in their place and asked, at least you knew we were going to be there. We weren't sneaking in like thieves in the night. So, Eric, go ahead.
First, I want to thank everyone for coming, because it shows your investment in trying to make this right. But when we look back and you look at the handout, it says Border Park Handbook. I think that we have to change that and make it a Border Parks policy manual. I think right off the bat it's a handbook, so then, there's a lot of gray area within it. We talk about just what Mr. Faticani was saying about fee collection, and when the permit's released, when it's released, it should be released to 2 people, or 3 even at that point. When it's released, it should automatically go to the Parks Department saying, okay, this is released. Now you can go pick up the trash or the electricity, or you could turn on the water or do whatever they're going to do. Without them knowing that, they don't know if the fee has even been paid, but they're over there doing the work. So I do think that a lot of this stems from our lack of communications between departments. And to me, I would suggest to the manager that he probably would put the rec department back into the Parks Department where it initially came from, because it doesn't make any sense to have one separated from the other. One hand is tied to the other when you start looking at this stuff. And I know I'm giving you more work, Mr. Cohen, but I just think it's something that has to work together. When we look at the fee structure in here and we start looking through things, the city council sets the schedule of fees. What happens after that point is waivers take place based off of, I'm not sure what causes a waiver and what doesn't, what initiates it, but whether the state says they may do this. It doesn't tell a city or town that they have to do this in their ordinances. Then when it came to us, there's another guide that basically, that's up to interpretation, and it's going back and forth. But if we have to change the ordinance to say, we don't want that in your hands. I don't think it's fair to have you guys stand up here as a Board of Parks and have to make a decision on whether someone has 3 kids and wants a field for free, or someone doesn't have 3 kids and doesn't want a field for free. So I don't know where that balance is, how we let people get away. The release of the permit should never be released. The date that they set the schedule, it's like renting a car. The date you sent that schedule, payment has to be made, or that date is not locked up for you. A lot of times you look at these little leagues and other things, some of them are subcontracting out the fields because they have the permit for it. So somebody from Wilmington's calling them, or there's a tournament in Chelmsford now, they call a guy from Lowell and say, hey, you got the fields permitted, can we use them? Yeah, we'll give you the money. Okay, back, and they're back paying each other back and forth, whether it's in kind or whatever reason they're doing. It's not fair to the city side. The trash fees alone at McPherson 10 times the amount that we're collecting for the weekend, which is insane to me. So we're putting dumpsters out there, and we have to have staff over there, and there's multiple things that go on that, to me, I just don't think it's fair to the city. When you look at the monies that these tournaments are collecting, and I'm not saying it's a Lowell tournament, it's this tournament, because some of them are national tournaments that are coming in here and grabbing it through a Lowell guy. But the tournament is set up for a national softball tournament, and they're grabbing the money and running away from it, and we're paying all the fees. And not only that, when we went to a neighborhood meeting, the neighborhood is flipped upside down with the parking and everything. So we got to find a solution, and that's where the Board of Parks has to come in and help the neighbors and say, look, here's the parking plan. What's your parking plan before we're going to release these fields? Because right now, no one's managing anything. There's no details over there saying, hey, come out of Bridge Street, because anybody who's ever gone up over there, Richardson, and you can't even see onto the street. So I think there's a lot of things that, I don't think this is a one meeting solve all package for this. And I would call it a policy manual, because it has bite that way, and it would go to the solicitor's office where they would look at it and say, yes, this policy is in accordance with all of state and city laws and ordinances. So when I look at it, I think this is a very deep discussion. That's why obviously all of you are here. We all want the best for the city, and I think that as we pull in more funds, we're going to spend $9 million on fields around this city. And I know the CFO is like, yeah, it's a lot of money. And we want to put lights in Hadley, and we want to do Gage, and there's just so many things we want to do to help out the parks. But we don't want to be robbed on the other end either. And I think that that's what's happening is people are taking advantage of us. We're locking up valuable times where nobody's on the field, but somebody has a permit. And they're telling people, oh, I got the permit for that field. You can't. Wait a minute. People still need to be able to manage those hours in that time. I wouldn't block off a whole summer. I would block off 2-week periods or a month period or whatever period you have to do so that people still have the right to it. I think Lowell family should have the right to it before any outside agency. Like we already have softball tournaments locked up all summer long, and some of the tournaments are being held by a person from Lowell, but the tournament organization is from outside of Lowell. So, and we just have to manage these things better. Nor'easters took in money at the gate and didn't pay anybody in the city and ran away with the money. So I would think before a permit is released or anyone gets a field, the payment should be in hand to lock down that date, because that's just the way life is. If you want something, you lock down this date, okay, there has to be an agreement back and forth that the advantage is the city's, not the person renting it, and if they pull out, then they have a certain time to cancel. I just think that's fair. A lot of people fall under the nonprofit thing, and you see you can spend money on equipment, you can spend money that to me is not really nonprofit and run away with things. I just want to be clear too, any concession stand built on city property is the property of the city of Lowell, and we all should have keys to that. I don't care who thinks what. Once it gets built on the property of the city of Lowell, it either had to be donated to the city or it's a structure that should have never been built on a city property. That's just the facts. And I just think it's fair to the city that we have those keys. And Mr. Cohen, you should have a key to every single concession stand in this city. If there's a water break in there, if there's anything that goes on in there, you would be the first one called and respond to it. So I think that that's fair, and I know you don't have those, and that's a sad truth about how we're managing our own property. So we just have to take a step back, start looking at this policy manual, I think, from the beginning. The money that's gone, it's probably a wash at this point. Yeah, you might get a few dollars back in. How do we prevent it from going from this date forward? How do we give the Board of Parks enough power to sit down and say, look, we're going to treat everybody as equal as we can, and if somebody doesn't like it, then let them go down to a city council meeting or let them go see a city manager or the CFO for any waivers. I think that's fair. I don't think it should be put on the Parks Department, but I mean the Board of Parks. And, the Parks Department itself, we're already spread so thin that even these tournaments and everything, it's something we have managed homeless, we have to manage all the veterans memorials, all of these things, and we're looking, saying, we're down here picking up someone's trash who's making a boatload of money on the backside, and we're not doing anything for ourselves. So I think that if we look at this, Paul, it's a great start, the handbook, but I think we really have to dive in and talk to the experts. What do you see that would benefit your board or your function? Because you're the function. You have to figure out, okay, what is in the best interest of a function going forward? And Peter, you've been at this for a long time, and you know that there is wiggle room on everything in between. And Mr. Connor, the same thing. You've been here a long, long time, and you know that people are walking up here taking advantage of this city. And it's sad that the kids in the neighborhoods are not the ones who are benefiting from it. Every softball tournament that walks down here, there might be 12 kids in each age group from the city that play, and the rest are from outside the city. So if people say, oh, they're coming here for this or that, they're not spending money on anything. People are complaining that they have propane tanks and grills at these places. So they're not spending money at the local variety store or any of that. They're coming in, they're running from McPherson's to Callery to Manning and back, right through the city, and then they're gone. I just think we have a responsibility to not only Peter in the Board of Parks, but also to the Parks Department to try to say, okay, what do you want to see in here? What works for you? The payment thing is obviously we have to tighten it up, and I think the CFO will be more involved in this than ever, because I think that these are funds that all of us just looked and said, well, wait a minute, where did these funds go? And prior to the report, there was a lot more money owed, and it's really not fair to you guys. So to me, I think we turn it over to you, and you tell us what you're looking at in this policy manual. and get invested, because we'll push back if we disagree. I promise you that. If it's
Yeah.
something that we think you're in favor of and it's going to take care of a certain group, we'll definitely push back.
See, this isn't an easy fix right now that we're having a meeting and everything's going to be solved. This is like a complicated thing, but it was through a motion that we realized money is owed to the city. So what is the policy? We have 36 pages of fees and, prices and this, that, and the other, and penalties and all this stuff. But we have one page that says payment policy. Payments are due prior to the start date of the permit. So how do we owe all this money? How did people owe all this money? Issued permits are not generally refunded in the event of cancellation by the requester. These are good things to talk about. These are good things to have here. But it isn't me. It should be discussed, like Eric said. What do you want to see? Because there should be a policy in place defining different things of the rules. For example, and who is it that collects the money? Who is it? Did we establish that through the policy? I want to have a birthday party. I don't have a bank set up to deposit so that I could get a permit once the bank got my payment. I'm just a housewife that wants to have a birthday party. How do I go about that? Who do I pay? Can I charge it so that later on, after I have the party, I'm going to screw you? You're not going to get a dime. Do you hear what I'm saying? I don't want that. But there's no policy that says that you have to pay up front. Is there? Because I didn't see it. That's what I want to see. I want to see. I know this is a handbook. There's 36 pages of something else, but there's only like one page of something that I don't quite understand, and we have to define it. That's up to you to define what is the policy. It should be you pay up front, and it should be in writing. You want to have a gender revelation, you can reveal the gender of the child, but you can't reveal the cash to me. I want the city to get paid before that. You're going to have an eating contest. We had two eating contests, pie eating contests, or whatever the heck. They can stuff their face, but they can't stuff our coffers with the money to pay right here. These are the things I want to see. I want to see the policy that says that. Now, for example, who has the right to waive a fee? Is it the Board of Parks? I don't mind who it is if you feel that the Board of Parks can do that. For example, let's say that Robert Hunt over here has a concern, and I want everybody to hear that because he's the president of Tyler Park. You know that the neighborhood groups do so much for the city. They take the place of overseeing their little piece of the rock in their different sections of the city. Tyler Park is no exception. They do a tremendous job with whatever they do. So, Robert, give us an idea of what you're here for today.
I'm here today because I'm looking at the green space. So when you go on the city's website, you have a choice. You can pick fields. Oh, you picked the mark? Okay. All right, they told me I didn't have to earlier, so.
I didn't say it.
He did. All right, so good evening, Councilor Chairperson Marcia, Councilor Gitchner. My name is Robert Hunt, and again, I'm the president of the Friends of Tyler Park. And I'd like to speak tonight on the permitting and fee system currently employed by the Parks and Rec as it pertains to green space. So if you don't know, when you go on the website, you have a choice. You either pick parks or you pick green space. There's 12 possibilities in green space out of 54 that you can apply for permits for. So there's actually 54 green spaces in the city designated, but only 12 of them are allowed for permits. We currently pick it. The Friends of Tyler Park has been around since 1989, and we've never had to pay. Our fees have always been waived, going back to that. We feel as though some of the things that we do, we provide opportunities for the neighborhood and the city to enjoy the historic park in the following ways. We have 3 free summer concerts that we put, everything is free. We have 1 movie night in the park in September, that's also free. We don't charge anybody anything at all to get in. They can come, sit, listen to music, they can have food, we provide hot dogs, popcorn, drinks, all free. We don't charge them anything, all right? We also give away 4 scholarships to local seniors at Lowell High School, Greater Lowell Vocational, the Collegiate Charter, and Lowell Catholic. We also, every year, donate $400 to the Lowell Police Department for Toys for Kids. We survive by doing sponsorships. So we go to businesses and individuals that give us money to sponsor, to pay the bands, to pay for all of the expenses, and I looked at it as everything that comes in basically goes out, and some of the things that we do, we also have 2 days of cleanup in the park in April. We'll have a Friday and a Saturday. And we're invested in the care of the park. And this is a neighborhood group. And we could not do this without Shannon's help. I mean, he has been so beneficial for us in taking care of the park, either providing us with plantings that have died, picking up the trash, bark mulch, and a variety of different, any help that we've needed had done that. We've been able to get it from him. Most recently, we had an example of the condition of the park. Age-Friendly Lowell commented favorably after a city audit at the park as to it was the cleanest and best-kept park in the city of Lowell. That's what they did. After doing 36 audits within the park, they picked Friends of Tyler Park, or the Tyler Park, as being the cleanest and the best well-run. So in short, the Friends of Tyler Park members feel that we have maintained our mission statement to sponsor and develop major cultural events, which we do with the movie nights and also with the concerts, to encourage community involvement in maintaining the park, and to maintain a relationship with the Lowell Parks Department for continued sharing of park cleanup. So at the end, what I'm looking for is to be able to separate what I've heard tonight of fields and green space. And I think the green space should not be charged unless they're charging a fee to get in or a fee to pay, but there's no play. Because all of these green space parks are non-passive parks. No active, no ball playing, no nothing.
Well, they're not non-passive parks. They're passive
They're passive
parks.
parks, right. Or non-active parks, no ball playing.
Right. Having said what he just said, as part of the policy, we should recognize what he said and waive a fee on this instance for all the...
No, you never.
No, but it should be, absolutely, you're right, you have not, and he had has a good rapport with the Parks Department, the Board of Parks, but there's nothing that says that. There's no policy that says that, and there really should be a policy, because he's just one of the groups. There are certain things that the city would waive, and I would be in favor of waiving the fee, such as the domestic violence gathering that we had last year at the South Common. They waived the fee for us for the domestic violence. We cleaned up afterwards, and it was a very well-established thing. So, but there's no policy that says that. And what he did say was very important. Now, see, we're not making the policy here. You're making the policy. We're just giving you the suggestions. If someone is wanting a green space and they want to charge a fee to come in, I don't know that we're going to waive your whatchamacallit, because there are exceptions. Do you see what I'm saying? You have the right to drive on the street, but you don't have the right to speed, or we're going to give you a ticket. You see what I'm saying? Something like that. So,
Just one more thing. In my years of going to the Board of Parks, getting permits from you guys, they do a good job of asking questions about what you're going to do, are you going to charge? So they get an idea
That's
from
right,
that.
they
Which is
do.
why I do believe that some of it's waived, some of it's not. I just can't say enough about the parks and, being able to be inclusive and having people come in. And it's all neighborhood people. I mean, we do get people from outside, but they come in and listen. But most of the time, it's people from within the Highlands neighborhood or any neighborhood or anybody from the city can come. And it would be a shame to lose that.
yes, it would be a shame.
Yeah.
Did you have a question there, Tom? Okay, Eric.
Thank you. So when we look at this handout that we have, there's 6 areas that you guys have outlined already. So I think it would be important if we went through each area rather than jumping around, and see what value each area actually has. Like, I'm sure the area of department contacts, the information is probably okay. It's not okay. All right, so we can update that very easily, I think, right? All right, so my question is, if I'm just an outsider looking online at this policy manual that's in draft form, but it's 15 years old or whatever, however it is, it's been in draft form. I'm just looking, okay, there's 6 areas that I have to look at. So I look at the first area, I say, how to request a permit. But when you look at how to request a permit, it doesn't tell me how to really request a permit. It says, per the City of Lowell's Board of Parks, the use of parks, facilities, or facility in associated recreation areas are subjected to permit reservations and specific date, time, fees, and permitting regulations which govern the use of the facilities and areas. But it doesn't tell me who to go to. How do I even start this process? It just basically tells me this outline that the following information has been adopted by the Board of Parks and is subjected to change. And then it goes to, College Stadium, permits for other facilities, resident fees are applied. But it doesn't even start to tell me, as a person on the outside, do I contact Shannon? Do I contact, Connor? Where do I go to start this process? How do I start this process? So I think that is an important piece just in how to request a permit. How to request a permit would be, okay, to call your office and speak to the secretary or to this person, and
That's page 1.
yeah, it should give the numbers in there and say this is how you outline to get to the next stage. Because I don't really see an outline on how to even request the permit. If I'm the average person on the outside and I read this, I don't understand how to even start the process. So I think that's really a key to the piece to start. But I want to hear from all of you, because our voices are something that we're reading. You guys are the experts. So when I look around here, a passive park, I don't see as, you probably don't get many people coming into the Board of Parks to use the passive parks, do you? So passive parks, if it's going to be for like those type of events, I wouldn't even think you would let people on them anyway. If someone came in and said, I want to have a birthday party on Tyler Park, I'd be like, whoa, wait a minute. We need to.
Well, wait a minute.
But I
Is
don't
a
know.
passive park a green space? Is that the same thing?
So like Muldoon is a passive park.
Yeah.
That gets requested. Fort Hill gets requested a lot. That's a passive park.
So how do we define that? How do we define what it can and can't be used for? Because I think Fort Hill has a different use than Tyler Park may have. So how do we define the use of each one of these parks in is it okay, isn't it okay? And you would know better than me what they're used for. You're not going to, can you go out there and play Frisbee on Tyler Park if you are having a certain type of event? I don't think I don't know. I don't think it's okay up there, but it is at Muldoon and it is over here. So what are the separations from each park? So this is going to be a lot of work. This isn't something that, you're just going to say, oh, okay, all of this fit in this, and then here we are and go. But a good, solid outline to each one of these, because that's a historical area. Tyler Park is maintained differently than Muldoon, maybe than Fort Hill. I don't know, whatever one you're looking at.
Yeah, they're still all considered passive parks.
So can we break it out of a passive park and then say what the use of each one can be for? What it can be used for? Can you define it? I mean, that's really what the Board of Parks has to do at the moment of the permit anyway. So why not just put it out there in the beginning through you or through whoever set these parks up as a certain type of park and say, okay, this is the use of this park. You know, you can take it for this use. If not, you're going to have to go over to here for this type of use. I don't know that answer because it's not well defined in here. So if I live in the Tyler Park neighborhood and I see that they can do certain things at Shed Park, why can't I do it at Tyler Park? But if we define that out and say, here it is, then I think that works well. But, and I do think if we continue to move through this, if we just stick to what we're talking about here, request for permit. So I'm requesting a permit. Who do I contact to request that permit?
And who do you pay?
What piece comes into play? The pay piece would come out under the permit fee schedule and stuff like that. But once you get into that, first, just the request, and what am I requesting? You know, and what park is available for that type of request? And I think that's easy.
Do you understand where we're going here? Do you understand what we're trying to do? We're trying to make it easier for people to rent the fees to go to a park and utilize what we have. But we want a policy so that they know that you have to pay. I think a policy, and we should take a vote on it. I would make a motion, and I don't know if you're going to agree with me or not, because it would have to go before the Board of Park. We can make a motion. That doesn't mean that it's set in stone, because we all know that the Board of Park supersedes anything this subcommittee has to say. But I think a policy should be in place that certain areas of, like, renting a park for a birthday party or a gender reveal or a whatever should be paid for up front before the permit is issued. I really feel that. I don't want to, the only thing I trust is God. I don't trust.
The only thing I'm not too sure of, and to the Assistant City Solicitor, when the city sets a schedule of fees, it's not changeable or waivable by any public board. And that's what we're going back and forth at the languages. Can they waive a fee if it's defined? I'm not sure you can. So, and if they can, then I think that's the city council's opportunity to make an ordinance change. Because I don't think it's fair to have people walk into a Board of Parks and say, hey, you waived it for so-and-so last week, now where's my shot at this pie? And I'm not sold on the language is strong enough for that. And you've seen the emails back and forth. So I think that we really need to visit that and just understand. And if it is that strong, then we need to come back to the city council and take that power back and say, okay, we need to change that ordinance. But do you have anything to add to that?
No, so I think everything you said is correct, and so has already gone back and forth up to this point. You're absolutely right. City council, they're the ones who establish the fees that they have in the fee schedule. Now, I think where there is some interpretation of whether it's Mass General Law 45 or you go to the actual ordinance itself for the city, the authority to enforce them is what falls within the parks. So if there needs to be a change at what the actual fees are, that's something that would, by way of an ordinance. But in terms of the fees are what they are, how they're implemented, by way of a waiver, that's what ultimately would fall in the parks.
Right. So what I believe I interpret that as is just when something says $100 in here, someone can't knock it down to 50 based off of someone's background, and that's what has been seen in some of the fees that have been paid. So that's what we're trying to figure out is in between. And do we need to get better language to make it stronger in between? But I really would like to just go through, if it's okay with the chairperson, each one individually and try to, if we only get through two tonight, that's okay, and then come back for the others. But I think Mr. Rudy would like to add something.
Go ahead.
Keith Rudy, Board of Parks member. I agree that I'm glad we're at least getting started. I was a little bit taken back being on so many city committees and union committees all my life that there was no book of policy and procedures. And it seemed like every time people were watching us, I was getting called, me the counselors or former board members on the Board of Parks and saying, you guys can't do that. You're not supposed to do that. Well, how am I supposed to know if I don't get a book telling me what my policy and procedures are? So I applaud the Recreation Director and its Secretary for at least starting it. It is a guide. But it's pretty tough when you're starting to put a policy and procedure book together if you don't know what your authority is. So, for instance, if I'm told I can't waive because of Chapter 150 in the city ordinance, I need to know that. I need to know what I can do and what I can't do, when I can do it, and when I can't do it. That's not any place in the booklet that you can see now what we can do and what we can't do and when we can do it. I agree with the chairperson of the board of the subcommittee of parks and the chair in the member council Getcha, that we have to have clear and precise authority of what we can do and what we can't do. Either that, we're wasting our time. We can put this together all day and then we'll tell, well, everything you did there, you can't do that. If there's a mass general law out there, or there's Chapter 150 of the city ordinance that tells us we can't do that, we have to work within them in the rules and guides given to us. This book is not going to be put together overnight, and why we never had a book is beyond me. I've never heard of any committee, no committee, whether I was on a youth committee when I was a kid in high school, that didn't have policy and procedures that told you what you can do, when you can do it, and how you can do it. And every time I've asked for a book, I was laughed at, basically laughed at, and said, go to Maine. Maybe you might want to go up to Maine and see so-and-so. Maybe she got one book for you. It's just, this is how we got here. This is how we got here. As far as my concern and my time on a board of parks, if I could give the fields free to everybody, I would. That's, the taxpayers own the fields. But we have to have guides. As Mr. Councilor Gitcher said, if you got 2 or 3 people that want to use the field at the same time, that's the reason why we give out permits, so we try to do it fairly and equal for all people to have the right to use the fields. And if there are people outside the city that want to use the fields, we set a fee for the person. My only question is, maybe someone in this room, maybe the CFO would know, but when somebody goes for a permit in the inspector's office and they want to build something, they do something, do they pay the fees right there before they leave, before they get the permit and say, yep, you've been given a permit to do the field? I think we have to have a better accountability. I think we don't want, I know from the Board of Parks, I wouldn't want any of our employees in the Parks or Recreation to handle any money, none whatsoever. But I agree with Councilor Mercia that if someone doesn't do online checking and stuff like that, so we got to tell them, well, you can't rent the field. Maybe they can go, and once they get approved for the permit and whatever the fee is, they go to the treasurer's office and they pay their fee. I don't know. But the problem with paying the fee seems to be, to me, one problem. How do we even fund this fee? If this person rents it for the day, 16th anniversary, whatever it may be, a wedding anniversary, and something happens, and that person told us a month before, I can't use that field that day because so-and-so, how we refund them? Can't give them credit. They don't want it again. So I agree with Councilor Gitcher that we have this. This is going to be, I believe, with the amount of responsibilities for the Board of Parks and the amount of areas that we're talking about across the city, I don't know, I'm told there's over 100 areas between open green space, areas, parks, and everything we're involved with. I think it's going to take, I'll be honest with you, a couple of months. You got to go through this diligently, looking at all kinds of things of not just paying back, but what defines a green space? What defines a youth organization? Someone puts a lead together and say, I'm a youth organization. Does it have to be a 501c3? I don't know. So I think there's a lot of things that has to be answered here, and I think I'm glad we're at least starting. But I think from the council, what we're looking for from the council is give us a guide of what we can do and what we can't do. If we're saying that under the Chapter 150 that we cannot waive fees, that's fine. I think there are some times when the board should have at least some type of jurisdiction of requesting a fee waive. And purpose, if I can give you just one instance, unfortunately, there was a young boy that drowned up at Rowley Farms. And his family came to the Board of Parks requesting a celebration of life. And there was a fee for that park. And we as the Board of Parks felt that this is a city issue, that we wanted to come together as a city to grieve this unfortunate situation. So we waived the fees. I was called that next day and said, you know you weren't supposed to waive that fee? It was the right thing to do. So we have to know when we can do it and when we can't. and at least allow the door open for us, so if we can request, if it's the council that has to approve it or the city manager has to approve it, to allow us some type of way to request a waiver fees if we're not able to waive a fee. So I'm just starting, but thank you.
I think the function, because of Plan E, for waivers would go to the city manager's office, not to the council, because they can do it in other areas. But again, that's something to have the city solicitor's office look at and see who actually can waive those fees. But I believe like building permits and stuff like that, when there's a waiver, I believe the city manager's office would have the right to waive those because it's a day-to-day operation piece. So I think that under Plan E, it would go to the manager's office. But that, again, it's a perfect point to look at when you start looking at these things. And again, we're not here to try to say, okay, we want to take more and more money. It's not a money grab per se. It's an equity. It's just let's treat people fairly across the board. Because even in the rules and regulations that we have here, number 3, it says all groups must dispose of their own trash. That is not happening. It's not even remotely happening. And we're paying these fees. And it's insane that we're paying these fees. So that's where these things have to be dialed in and people have to really look. Mr. Hunt?
As far as the trash goes, they normally pick up trash at the parks anyways. There's city barrels.
Again, I think everyone would be dialed in specific, like you're talking about something else. Yes, I would agree with your event because it's basically nonprofit in that end. But there are for-profit people who are creating large amounts of trash to the point where we have to put dumpsters in these areas and cover that. So it's not city trash at that point when we're pulling in non-residents into our city and doing it. So it just really has to be dialed in at their level.
You have to separate the fields from the green spaces.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Right?
Yeah, I agree.
That's my only fear. And to be honest with you, if you were to do the manage, this is, again, just my opinion, as a citizen of Lowell, if you let the manager do it, it becomes impersonal. If you let the Board of Parks do it, they listen to the people when they come down for the permit initially. That information will not get back to the city manager's office. He's just making no, we're not going to do it.
The manager would have the authority to push that decision-making to that board if that would be the will of the city manager's office. Again, they have to control the day-to-day operations like they do in the plumbing permits and everything else. There's gray areas that have to come back and forth. So I would suggest that, and I do agree that they do a phenomenal job back and forth. We just, when you look at this, and that's what the rules and regulations are about. We can dial them in different areas and make sure, but I just don't think our Parks Department should be taxed the way they are for outside interests to come into the city and use these fields and drop all their trash. They break a chair they're sitting on, it's there. You got propane use, and all these things are violations of our own regulations, but we're having a hard time managing them, and it's costing us thousands and thousands of dollars where, you know, I can tell you that Shannon's budget is not in the best shape when it comes to being, funded. You're trying to move pieces and trying to put things together, and you look at some of the fields, they're very tough to maintain when this is an area where you could be holding funds that could actually the following year be put back into the fields. So I do think you're right in a lot of ways what you're saying. I don't want to take power away from the Board of Parks, but the way it has been run without the rules and regulations and everything and the policies and everything just should be dialed in from all of you and then come back with a stronger piece. And what we're saying is, maybe you go over the first 2 of the 6 and we come back in a month and we sit down and say, okay, and the guidance more or less, I think that everyone just got the outline from all of us that, look, how do you request a permit? Okay, write up something, that's feasible. And I would put Peter in charge of that because Peter does this day in and day out with the or your group. I'm not trying to give you work, but your group does this day in and day out. When it comes down to the rules and regulation, Shannon needs to be a major part of that on trying to dial in. How do you want your fields treated? What is taxing your department? And then go over it with the Board of Parks. Obviously should be included in all of these decisions, and then priority users and stuff like that. But I just think you have to start talking to each other because the power play has pulled everyone out of the decision making, and now we don't even, like Mr. Rudy has said, we don't really have any bite in this at all, and nothing's being managed back and forth. We just watched take away the trash. Well, wait a minute. Mr. Hunt says, we're just a little group and we just put out a couple of bags. That's manageable because Tyler Park is not really a trash park where you get a lot of trash every day, I don't think. So it's not a big deal for once in a while. But when you look at McPherson's and now you got to take a dumpster from one area and now put it over there because you're gearing up for a season of people creating trash who aren't even here, who don't live in the city, I have to defer to someone should be paying for this. And I would think the CFO is on board 100% with, having people pay for this because our trash fees are crazy.
All right, so just, if I made one more thing and then I'll leave. It's a birthday party or a gender reveal, whatever. I'm a resident of Lowell. I have a dozen people. We take a cake, we go there, we get a permit. Do we need a permit? If we need a permit for that, I'm not collecting fees from them. I'm certainly not going to Chuck E. Cheese because Chuck E. Cheese is a business. He's got to pay. He's got to pay his heat, lights.
The city is a business too. We have to pay the people that are going to clean up after people.
Right, and that comes from the residents of Lowell that pay it. Right? That's general maintenance.
So then that should be defined.
General maintenance, right? General maintenance, if you go by and pick up a bag, if I did a gender reveal, I made one bag, plastic bag of trash, and I didn't take it. I'm not talking about fields, because that's a night. I have no idea how you deal with it now. Anyways, because they all want to go out in March and April and tear them up. From my point, where I stand, in the green space, if I wanted to have a birthday party, and I'm a taxpayer, and I live in the neighborhood, I would expect them to get a permit for free. I would. How much can you charge somebody for a birthday party? Where they want to go to get a caramel ice cream cake, bring it in the park on a nice day, cut it up, exchange gifts, they're gone, and maybe they leave a bag of trash, but no more than that. Shannon has the guys going around to all the parks, right?
I think he does that on a Monday, so it's during their normal routine, so it would be waived as you're saying. It's part of, but if it's going to cause overtime or outside the hours as they're doing it, and it's determined by the Board of Parks and also by Shannon's department that you're going to need people to be paid on overtime, then it's an outside the normal use of the city resources, so that would be chargeable. No, even those, you can have, a lot of people.
So,
Tom,
Even at green spaces, if they has to bring in a couple guys in to go pick up the garbage, you're paying these guys 4 hours overtime. So who's gonna pay for that? So if you got a party in an open space, green space, somebody has to come in and clean it up.
and
But most of the time, it's
I
not
mean,
just
just
one
pick
bag.
up the bags.
It's not just one bag. Sometimes there's more than one bag that people have.
And that's the other thing. It depends on the facility. Some facilities have to have a custodian there to open up bathrooms and provide electricity. Other facilities don't. So the board will ask the size of the event that's going on and determine based on the size of the event if extra custodial is needed. And then based on the event, like if it's a birthday party for a 6-year-old, if it's a youth permit for a Lowell resident, there's no fee generated for that. The permit fee structure for Lowell youth is $0. So if it was an adult birthday party, there might be a fee. If it's an out-of-towner, then it would be a fee. But the custodial cost, which is the real cost of a 4-hour permit, that would be determined based on the size of the event and what actual needs the person has. We have people who come to the board all the time and get permits and say, oh, no, it's just a regular birthday party. And then they'll call Haley a couple days later and say, well, I'm going to bring a bouncy house. Do you have power there? And it's like, well, that's not what you told the board. That generates a custodial cost. So it depends on the event, and we do have people who unfortunately aren't forthright with the board as far as what they're going to do. But if it's a typical small birthday party at a park for a youth that no custodians needed, there wouldn't be a fee for that. But it depends on the facility. Shed Park Pavilion requires one. Carly Stadium always requires one. So that's why the Board of Park is important in the process, because they'll talk to the board member, the people putting in the requests, discuss it among themselves and determine are they in town, out of town, what's the age, is it a youth, is it an adult event, how big is the event going to be, and then they kind of have to live with the information they're provided by the person making the request.
See, and I think that what we're trying to do is just be an extension of your voice. So you have to come out and tell us what you see is, and we don't want to strip the Board of Parks of anything. We're just worried about collection of fees and making sure that we're getting, people aren't subbing out our areas and making money off us. The trash is feasibly picked up. And it's not usually, we're not really I'm not dialing in more to a birthday party. It's more so of big tournaments and stuff like that are using heavy resources for long periods of time. It's not so much the passive parks or the birthday parties. I think those things, okay, someone beat you for $25 for a birthday party. We lost. Did we actually put a person out there or not?
Can I borrow
get it.
$25 from you? Because you're never going to get it back. Okay? You don't like that?
I'll give you it once. The second time, I wouldn't give you the $25, right? But no, I do agree with Councilor Mercier is saying that we really have to dial in the fee exchange. But I also wanted to look at this because of the rules and regulations and policy piece that, the board is saying that, we don't really know where we're going. And one member may say one thing and another one might have a different opportunity. So I think if we have an opportunity here just to dial in to make it easier on a lot of people, and you can blame the council for this. And I think that's the important piece here is that the council started this. So now let's try to dial in what we need to make this operational, whether it's passive parks, okay. I'm okay with that. I don't have really a problem with the trash being picked up. It's, a couple bags. But I do have a problem when we have to bring a 30-yard dumpster over to McPherson's to pick up, and we're paying less than anybody else. And not only McPherson's, then you got Calorie, and you have, there's a multitude of them that are being used at one time that this permit fee, that whatever the amount was in thousands of dollars, did not cover the trash for this year. It will not. Because trash is through the roof right now and being picked up. So I think we just need to do better. And I would put this back in the hands of Peter and Shannon and the Board of Parks and say, come back to us. And obviously the CFO needs to be in this conversation because he knows, I think we also have to dial in where the reports go of the funds taken in back to the CFO's office, rather than go through this channel to get to this channel. If there's a report sent out to the health department's finance person, it should also be CC'd to the CFO's office so that they can understand what's going on with these funds also. So my point is that we have we have 6 here. So if we went back and said, okay, Peter, if you could take the lead with Shannon and say, okay, can you go over the first two, how to request a permit and rules and regulations? And then maybe we meet in a month and come back and say, okay, well, here's how we define Tyler Park. And then Bob would have more of a bite to his conversation, saying, okay, yeah, I agree, I disagree with this piece. Or, here's how we're defining a rental at Shed Park. A rental at Shed Park might be different in the passive areas than Tyler Park. So I think we need to look at each one, and if it's different, outline it as different from past Board of Parks rulings on how they're being used. I think that's fair, because tomorrow morning, I'm sure Bob doesn't want to wake up at a birthday party, hitting wiffle balls on the middle of Tyler Park. That may cause some differences up there. So versus Shed Park, they can do that over there. So I think we just need to dial in better.
So who provided the city council with this handbook? Peter, did you? Oh. Haley, did you?
Yeah, so when I presented it to the board, it's like in no means official in any way. It's like ongoing entirely. And then when I did throw it together, I don't have a lot of time necessarily where I could have done this between December and January. Because, Keith kind of spearheaded the whole thing with what is the policies. And I was like, well, I just started in May, so I'm still learning everything too. Basically, what I did is we have these. It's the same 2 documents, like the requesting a permit and then the rules and regulations.
Yep.
And I just copied everything in there. My intention when I started putting it together, which is why like the contact information and stuff, is I just threw it in there as like a placeholder because I didn't know it was going to have this big of a snowball effect and then all eyes would be on it. So we do have a section on our website that has like the reservation request directions detailed. So I can give this to you if you want to look at it briefly.
Yes.
But so that's the only reason why it's not in there. And then when I presented it to the board that following like morning, the council wanted it. So I was like, this looks like a 3rd grader kind of like threw it together. But it was just basically like to piggyback off of cases. I don't know if you guys have ever looked at it, but the way it's structured and stuff, I don't think is up to date either, which is where I took the contact information and updated what I could with the time that I had. But it was basically just like a this is how I want to structure it. What does the board want to see in it? I don't even know what's legal and what isn't legal. Like, what are these policies actually official, or did we just inherit them from Parks 30 years? Like, I don't know. So I just want to stress that this is in no means official in any way, but because I don't know if that was clear when it was presented.
Can I just say that you did a tremendous job? As a new person, you did a very good job. I think this is great. And that isn't why I'm asking that. I'm asking if you have an extra copy. Corey would like one, because he does not have one, so he's winging it to listen to what we're saying, so.
Yeah, you can look at, it has some notes and stuff in it, what Peter obviously wrote back to me, since I haven't been able to update it, but yeah, I can email it to you too.
Yeah.
See, the one thing about a policy is they're always working documents. Something's going to come up that's going to challenge you to make a change. So that's what policies are based off of. I had to write 141 of them for the town of Lexington at one time. And every time you write one, something else comes up and you say, okay, the Board of Parks, okay, we got to come back and revisit this little section. And it's just a long-term, and it really, what do we mean, 2023? And this is what, the Board of Parks had, or even down there, it's because there's always somebody wants more power in the decision of the words that are going to be written. So nobody wants to write them. You took on the challenge that there's not one person in this room that wanted to write that. And because there's always that gray area that you miss, or you slip on, or you're moving. So the beginning, the policy starts the conversation. So I think that you started a tough conversation that we're all invested in. So we just want to see what's going to come back. And the things that we look at and highlight may not be what the Board of Parks wants, or what Shannon may want, or what Peter wants. But Keek, you just on Keek?
So, I understand the process going forward is that you're going to ask the Board of Parks to sit down and draft up some type of policy.
Yes.
Starting from number one, how you request a permit, what fields are you looking for, green space, we'll define them, what the charge is, what the service you're looking for, and then we'll meet with the Board of Parks, and hopefully, the attorney be here. So we'll go over what we have drafted, or what we can, in case some stuff is not within the guidelines of the law, we might have to adjust it. For instance, the rates. I noticed when Councilor Gitcher brought up the meeting, and I agree with them, some of these rates are set back to 2016 and 17, my understanding. So we're charging at a 4-hour block for a maintenance guy, a custodian to be at a park, and we're charging $120. What are we charging for? The lowest paid employee at that department, or the highest? Because it varies. You got the labor up there probably making $20 an hour, and you got a working foreman, maintenance, craftsman, whatever, making $30 an hour, so he's $60. We're charging $120. So we're losing on these fees. And we may be, because we're using 2016 rates. So when we're putting this together, we can put, my beliefs, doing union stuff, you always go with the highest rate. Go with the highest rate, you're never going to lose. So if you go with the highest rate that employee pays that department, you go with that rate, you're never going to lose any money. If you go with the lower part, where you're paying the labor $120, now you get the maintenance foreman up there, you take them $160, now you're losing $40 per event. So is it my understanding, really just so we go forward, I'm sorry, Madam Chairperson, going forward, that we can put some guides together if we meet
Yeah.
with the Board of Parks maybe in a month or so? And we can
Yes.
go over and-
So I'm going to make a motion that we have another, in a month, a joint meeting with the Board of Parks and this Parks and Recreation Subcommittee. Can we do that? Okay. And then bring some of your ideas, what you think that we're looking for here. I hope you understand, but one of the very main questions that I have, and I still don't have an answer, maybe you said it 5 times, I don't know, but who's keeping track of the money? Who's keeping track if,
I think Mr. Fattacani, I think, I'm not going to speak for him, but I think at the last meeting, at the council meeting, when Councilor Gitcher's motion was asked at, I think he said it very clearly, that once we come to the end of the year, with permits that we're giving out, the money that were not collected, it was giving, to my understanding, to the Deputy of Finance of the Health Department. I believe that's what he stated at the council meeting. So where it went from there, I think you have to go from that position there, maybe possibly to the Health Department Director, and find out where did that go, and where, It's not that it's missing, it's just not collected.
Who's overseeing it? Who's
I
overseeing
think you'd have to ask Mr. Fatakenny in the health department.
the health department?
Well, the park's just-
Lisa, let's have the money there, sister. No, but-
So what happens is that people can go online
Right.
and they don't pay up front, like you said. Okay, so they don't pay up front. If we did ask them to pay up front, and like the Board of Parks member said, and their event didn't go through, we don't have a revolving account, so we cannot credit them back. They would only get a credit to be able to come back to have another park rented. So we cannot credit them money back. So if we ask them, say you wanted to come and do something, a pie eating contest, and we charge you $75. And then we said to you, oh, I am so sorry, Shed Park is not available on the date, May 11th, that you want. Somebody else has it. And you said, I don't want it now. I want my $75 back. Our account is not a revolving account. It's going to take a lot of work for us to give you your $75 back, okay? But I say, okay, well, you can now rent another park in the city of Lowell. And you say, no, I don't want it.
So for that reason alone, you're saying we can't charge up front because we don't have.
Well, we could do it.
I would at least try to do it.
We can try to, going
Because you know
forward.
what?
We
Here's the
can.
deal. I'm going to
Yep.
come to you and I'm going to say, I want to give my husband a birthday party and all his friends and family.
So going
coming
forward,
down.
yep.
But I don't want to pay you up front.
Yep.
I'll pay you after the event.
Right.
Now, if I don't pay, I can't ever, have another one because I screwed you once, okay? But I'm not going to have another party, so I don't care that I didn't pay it.
So going forward, with all of these fees, when they're etched in stone, and we know who we're going to waive or who we're not going to waive, then we can do it. So right now, what happens, and Haley can explain how it happens, when she leaves the Board of Park meeting and the next day, and they do it online, then they're going to pay at that point in time, or if you want them to pay the day before. So as soon as they know the day that they're going to have their event, and their day that their event's going to be done in stone, then we can have them pay.
So put that down as a policy then.
Correct.
If that's what you feel.
Correct. And
But
that's gonna be-
I don't see
right.
any of that.
Right.
I don't
Right.
see it.
And like she said, this as she's doing this is a work in progress. This is her first
Yes, I
turn as this.
understand. I
Right.
understand.
But the other thing is that the Board of Parks meets once a month. Okay, meets once a month on a Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And let Haley talk about how the process goes for her doing this. And like on her January meeting, how many permits did you do?
Oh, God, I don't know. I don't even know.
Right.
It was just for our permits. We had
Right.
other permits.
So along with these, when they go online, sometimes they don't know whether the custodian's with it, like what kind of fees are along with it. So do we say, like, every time you go on, you're automatically going to get, like, whatever the least amount of a fee is? So they're automatically paying the lowest fee, and then they tack something along with it? Like, how much of a fee are they automatically paying?
Yeah.
And then, like Counselor Gitchier said, are we going to make it so that they're not going to be doing for the full year? So now we have people who are doing their softball ones for, what did they just do? They just did it for the full season? What did they do it, like?
May through August.
May, June, July, August? So if we're now cutting them down, that they're not doing every however many days a week for the whole thing, so they're not paying thousands of dollars and we're cutting them down, so then that's going to cut down the amount that they owe at a certain period of time as well. Because I don't think that the people we're losing money on are those people that are paying $50 a whack.
No.
Those aren't the people who we're losing money on. We're losing money on the people who are renting for March, April, May, June, July, August.
So I do think that there's a solution to this because every other community does this. This isn't this big of an issue. I think that if we go to the Auditor Oates, she certainly will have a way to reimburse people money. I don't think that this is like this big. And I think if you lock down any scheduled date, you should have to cancel within 14 days because if I lock down the 4th of July in January, and then the day before the 4th of July, I say, hey, you know what? I'm not coming, give me my money back. There has to be a policy that's far enough out where if you're gonna cancel it as being the renter, that there's something there's a benefit to the city, so that it still can be rented out, so you still can have some kind of fee that's driven back in. But I do think that, I agree with you that the large ones are the issue. So, and I do think that Otter Oats, I'm sure in this conversation, will figure out a way that it can be reimbursed, it can be paid up front, it can be reimbursed within a 14-day period. And if you canceled it within 14 days, I'm sure within 28 days you'd have your money back. And that deters people from just canceling. Because, okay, you're giving me my money up front, but there is a 28-day from the cancellation of the field that you will get your money back. If you do that on your credit card, you charge something and then you go back, it doesn't get immediately put back. There's a time frame. So the city has the right for the same time frame to pay that back. But once you schedule something, you lock up a date, you should have to make payment right at that date. And I think once you do that, the city now holds those funds, and the only way that they get returned is through either Peter or the Board of Parks. They come up and say, look, you know what, 14 days at least in advance, it's not. Now, a rain date is a total different thing. If it rained out or something, okay, we'll return your money within 28 days. That's part of the policy, and if you want to rent it, your money will be returned within I don't know what that number would be. I don't want to speak for the auditor, or for the CFO, but if 28 days is even feasible, I don't know that answer, but.
Good point, because most people that come to us for a permit, we will suggest them get a rain date. So they get a rain date, now they got to pay the bill. So if they use the original one they need, they don't need a rain date, they should be reimbursed for the rain date. You should take them and say, no, we're going to give you credit instead. I don't need the rain date, I didn't use it.
Yeah, and I think there is a mechanism in government that can pay it back. I don't think that this is that challenging, but I mean, I would defer to Auditor Oates and hear her comments on this, but I know that other communities do reimbursements in a check form.
Yeah, we definitely could refund money if we collect the permits up front. It would be a short-term transaction, and in the event that the permit's not used, it would go through the treasurer's office. Only the treasurer's office can do refunds, but we could have the treasurer, you have to provide proof of payment, the treasurer would verify, and then we pay bills weekly on the warrant, and we could certainly refund, like we do that for cemeteries. Sometimes we have to refund. It's normal course of business for, motor vehicle excise tax, so it's certainly something that can be done that would allow, the Board of Parks to collect permit fees, once somebody reserves a field.
I think the only thing that makes it confusing with this is that it's not actually a health department, it's a parks.
Right.
So it has to come from the parks.
I don't know how it
department,
ended up.
not
I don't know how it ended up in your department anyway, but I don't understand that whole piece, and we didn't get to that piece yet. But I think that this is a DPW function more so than a health. But Connor, you know the setup of the finance much better than I do. But I would just say the same as when they go. Two questions to the Board of Parks members. When they go to the Board of Parks and someone stands up and says, I want to rent, I don't know, McPherson's, and at that point, don't they tell you what services are needed, or you have an idea, and that's where you guys say, okay, here's the charge?
We'll ask them what they're going to do, how many hours and all that, what the functions and all that. We tell them if it's, just going to be a birthday party for the kid or something, and they're going to cook, we tell them they can't use the propane gas or anything. I don't know if they listen to us, but like you said, there is out there using propane gas.
Yeah.
But I also think, Eric, since you brought that up, I think if we put on the request for permit, on the request for field, that should be outlined. What are you using the field for? What services are needed, stuff? And just my opinion, that permit, a copy of that permit should be on my agenda that night. I have all my questions are right there. What service you needed, what the fees for that service, because we're constantly asking these people, you're using, for instance, the non-conforming areas. We've had a couple of people come and ask us to use the non-conforming. Probably no charge, no resident. 300 people. 300 people. There's no bathrooms there. There's no police officers there. There's nothing there. So, I mean, and then you get that, you talk to Shannon, and Shannon said, well, we can put up, because it's a mess out there. They're cleaning up this stuff. So I think it would be helpful to the Board of Parks when you're filling out the request for use of the field or green space. there should be some line items in there outlining what exactly you're requesting, what services are you requesting. I think it helps, it goes immediately go a little quicker, if they have understanding, and it will give us some general questions. If it's not answered, are you sure this is what you need? Because sometimes the people don't know, they're coming for a permit the first time, or doesn't know, Madam Chair, but they don't know what they can have, what they don't have. They don't know what's provided. They don't really know what's provided to them.
He needs a microphone.
No, he needs to take him away.
No, he said he needs a microphone to
Oh,
speak.
you need a microphone.
Yeah.
Oh,
First time I've ever been told I'm not allowed.
So another piece to that, Keith, is that the next day after the events, Shannon goes over and sees the fields. And Shannon thinks that the renter didn't treat them the way they were outlined in the permit. Does Shannon come back to the board when this person comes back up and you have a date, time, and here it is to these people who come back the next time for a permit and say, look, you know what? You did this, 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 and this. There is no way. Do we do that, or do we just kind of, pick up after people who just...
Yeah, if there's problem groups, we have done that in the past. I have spoken with the board members once I see the agenda. This group, left this place a mess last year at this time, and
Could we document it at the time? Because just coming back afterwards, like the next day, say you go by and you say, okay, Calorie Park is a complete disaster, just send over an email to Mr. Faticani and say, look, you know what, they left it like this, this, and this. Can you contact them and put them on notice? Because at the end of the day, if we're not putting people on notice for the way they're doing these things, and it's a cost to us, again, we're going right back to the cost of everyone else and the workload. I think that those are things that need to be outlined in these, there should be some kind of policy on how people are treating things also. Because I've seen people in the past, like they just said, concession stands. We see people using concession stands that don't lease them from the city and they don't rent them. How does that happen? And some people say, well, that person paid for this concession stand, so they get to use. No, they don't. The electricity comes from the city, the water comes from the city, it's the city's concession stand. Whether it's down at Roberto Clemente, whether it's over at Hadley, whether it's wherever, if something is used, then it should have a user fee. That's just my determination to these things. They're city infrastructure. Every time something goes down on them, we're over there with our electricians, we're over there with our plumbers, we're over there trying to make up the irrigations that, were blown out or whatever they didn't do. So I just think that this manual is going to mean a lot to everybody in the end, and it will give you guys more of a bite to what you're doing than, arbitrarily waking up the next day and saying, yeah, they wrecked the field, but once you put some order in line, I think other people will hear it and they'll say, no, we better pick up after ourselves, or this or that, because they're going to take pictures and they're going to send them to Peter and try to get, us held accountable for what we're doing to these places.
is there any questions? Do you not realize what we're trying to do here? Yes, Haley.
Right now, like the way it works is, so say if you wanted to have a birthday party at Shed, you'd go on our website, you would make an account. It gives you the option to put whether it's a household or an organization.
What do you mean you make an account?
You have to make an account on MyRec, which that's the system that we use, because all the permits are done electronically now, so you won't be able to have a permit or access a permit without having an account. So we do have access to people's emails, whether they're still valid or not, I don't know, or the contact information, or if they use a PO box versus a residential address, things like that. But the next step would be to request the dates. If it's available, you'll get an email back, like Peter said, saying it's pending with the meeting information. The only thing about attaching a fee ahead of time, I guess my example would be like some of the friends groups. So if we attach it ahead of time, there was one for January where I think their fee estimated would have been like $375,000. So now if I'm putting in that request as the friends group, knowing that it should be waived, but I'd be charged the $375,000 if I paid up front. I don't know how to explain that for all the dates and times that they reserved. But then when they come to the meeting, it gets waived, or like there's no way for us to go on the website to see if like the honor system, kind of, if you're actually coming in for a birthday party, or if you're just going to put in youth fee because you see that it's free and there's no fee attached. So, I mean, I don't know if there's a way that we can mitigate that to attach it up front.
There
And then-
should be a pull down that would say requesting fee waiver from the Board of Parks. So they would hold off until they actually came to the Board of Parks. So they would still be able to do the placeholder to get to the Board of Parks, but there should be a drop down that says requesting fee waiver at time of Board of Parks.
I don't know if my rec can do that. Pete can probably speak more on it. And then my other thing was, my God, what was I going to say? Oh, when someone puts in the request, it asks for like a head count, purpose of reservation, you know, all that like details. But necessarily someone doesn't always put that information in, or like they'll put it ahead of time and then eventually they call me and say, hey, I do want to have a bouncy house. And I'm like, well, you're kind of out of luck if your event is before March 29th when they meet next. Like, you should have told them ahead of time. Whether they do it or not, I'm not there to check, so I don't know. Whether that changes the fee or not, I don't know. Or if they need license for alcohol or music, things like that, all that should be included ahead of time. But if they don't put it in there, when I'm making the agenda, it makes it difficult for me to have all that details for the board. So necessarily, I try to reach out to them if I see something that like doesn't make sense, or I'll call them and be like, hey, do you plan on doing this, or is this going to be a rain date, things like that. And then like recently with a city event, there was details in there, but it wasn't the entire thing. So it was a park cleanup plus a concert, and it was only put in as a park cleanup. So then I was like, well, you guys technically don't need to come before the board if it's just a cleanup. But then it turned out that it was going to be this whole concert thing, and they were going to bring in a stage. So then it was like back and forth after we had already posted the agenda. So I don't know. It is, all the information I feel like is on the website. It's just a matter of whether that person, like all of these, or how to request a permit. It is on there. It does say it. And then anytime someone calls, I happily spend 20 minutes walking them through, or Peter or whoever, Stacy, anything. But I don't know. I don't know what's the best way to mitigate that.
And we do have a computer for the public to use in the office by appointment if they have questions, or if they can't do it online. So if someone, we have a couple that have said, you know, I can't do this myself, I need help. So they come in, we'll sit down and help them create their account and submit their request. So we do have, you know, that ability for people as well. One thing I did want to mention is that the Board of Parks used to invite, and I believe it was several years ago, the solid waste and recycling person to come so they could weigh in on the fee structure as far as if they need a dumpster, those type of things, and also special events. So that way they could help them on the planning process for any additional licenses they might need, police detail information, and fire inspections for the girls. Over the years, as those people changed, we stopped having them. They stopped wanting to come, so they requested to be taken off the emails for the agendas. But that might be something that sounds like you would want us to have included back in for the next meeting and have those people invited. If they show up or not, I mean, they don't work for me. I can't make them come, but that might alleviate some of those issues that you're talking about right off the bat.
Yeah. Kiki?
Councilor Gitche brought up a good point. Recently, there was the, I believe it was the Friends of Shed Park that came before the council, I believe, and asked for approval to put a concession stand up there, up in the Upper Hill Page area, in the Page Field. And I think at that time, I think these people who are building these concession stands need to know what you just stated, that this is city property, that the keys have to be given to the Board of Parks. The Park Superintendent. These, are they inspected? Do we send our inspectors out there to make sure that the gas lines or water lines, everything's working properly? As someone who's run a youth organization for about 30 years, I know how important a concession stand is. It's part of also a fundraiser, but it's also a bathroom, public restrooms. So I'm not trying to hurt these leads, but I think we need to establish and let these people know when you're building these concession stands, they're built on the city property. It's city property. The city owns the buildings. We're taking these, you know. So I don't think that's fully understood, in my opinion. And I think the second thing, I still don't know. After all this time I was meeting, when or can the Board of Parks waive a fee? I don't know. I still don't know.
See, I think we're in two different areas right now. So waiving a fee and reducing a fee, that's what is being compromised here. Waiving a fee based off of an action of, like, you're saying, okay, we're waiving the fee based off.
For instance, like the incident I told you about. with that unfortunate situation.
I think that's what we're trying to define through the solicitor's office still, and we're waiting for that response, because I don't think it's far out of the Board of Parks' purview currently. I think it may be in there, but how do we manage that? That's really what the question is. But I do believe it is in the power of the Board of Parks.
Well, who's waiving the fees now? The Board of Parks, right? Is it the Board of Parks?
They're doing two things. They're reducing fees and waiving fees, which they don't have the right to reduce a fee. Waiving a fee is a
I don't see
question.
why they don't. I thought
Because
that
it's in the
law-
schedule of fees.
I think we want to, in all reality, give the attorney a chance to review it, because from what I know, that I've had some discussions about Chapter 150. And it states that the council, I believe, and I stand to correct it, that the city council is the only one that can waive fees. Now, it left it open-ended. It didn't say that we can't waive the fees. It just said the council has jurisdictions to do that. So, and I didn't see anything in that chapter that mentioned reduced fees. So I think giving the attorney at least a chance to look at it, review it, listening to maybe the meeting tonight will give him a better understanding of what he's looking for.
So you're-
Yes.
That's your assignment for tomorrow.
Well, you must be a great attorney from Ask Me. So I mean,
Yeah, this is good. This is good. Surprise. Anyway,
Do you want me, I can speak for a second if you'd
Okay.
like. So I'll certainly look into 150 more, but at least as it relates to, if you go to the city ordinance, so under Chapter 9, that sort of mirrors Mass General Law 45. And in that, it does give the Board of Parks the ability to waive fees. Now, I haven't seen anywhere the ability to reduce fees, because, and I would assume, and my understanding is the logic behind that is those fees come from city council. They come through ordinances. So they establish what the fee is, so the fee is the fee. My understanding is that the power is absolutely there within the Board of Parks to waive those fees. And now I think this does all circle back to a point that's already been made, having a guideline as to not necessarily when, but if certain instances happen more and more, giving you some guidance as to, all right, well, yeah, let's be a little more uniform here and waive it here, let's not waive it here. But the authority is there. The reducing fees, I don't think so, but waiving fees, yes. But again, I'll look into 150 and make sure that aligns with city ordinance and 45 as well.
I agree with everything that he just said.
That's why you asked me.
Very good, very good. So I'll entertain your motion, Eric, to go ahead, have a joint meeting.
So, joint meeting with the Parks Board and this subcommittee within the next month. So if we could, and that would obviously be contingent on the work that we just gave to Peter's office and to Shannon and the Board of Parks to come together and try to figure out, okay, I would just do the first two to begin with and try to define those two bullets in strength, and then go to 3, 4 afterwards, which would be more so that we would have to go to the treasurer's office, to the CFO, to the auditor on how we're going to set up this piece. And you may need IT and just have the drop downs right to say, okay, we need, to have this drop down here so we can press this so it can override through and try to get it to work so that if someone is looking for a waiver, they can click in and not have to put the payment in first. But I don't know how you would put a payment in before having a permit anyway. So if I'm coming to a piece and I'm looking for something, I don't know why you would have to pay it before you said, okay, here's my use, here's what my cost is, boom, then I pay it at that point. But I don't know, we'd have to look at this software and figure out, is that the way to do it? I know that I'm not very happy when people rent space that we have at Greater Lowell and they don't do something. So if someone doesn't even put in the lane lines, I'm like, why can't they put in the lane lines? You need to call them and make sure we document that they're not putting in the lane lines. So I do think that that is manageable in the city when you have somebody going out there right away, and if they come back complaining about they had a lot of trash to pick up or why it took them so long to go from this field to that field, I think that it's valuable. But
So you have the motion, Michael?
I do.
Roll call.
Council Mercia.
Yes.
Council Gitche.
yes.
Council Lee. Yes.
All right. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. There you go. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming out. No, but